children home. Wanna go.
Good evening, Dominica, wherever you are joining us from on our beautiful nature island, whatever village, whatever community, whatever hamlet you are joining us from. We want to welcome you back to another episode of Roots Connections on Q, right here on Q95, the big station. Of course, if you're joining us from the Caribbean region or the wider world, we say good evening to you as well. And thank you for joining us for Roots Connections on Q, right here on Q95. This is where we get together every second and fourth Wednesday to tap into our experts at home and abroad to discuss practical and concrete opportunities for moving our lives forward, especially as it relates to financial opportunities. So whether we are talking about alternative ways to earn more income in these very challenging economic times, or we are talking about emerging careers that our young people should consider pursuing, this is your program for us as Dominicans and friends of Dominicans to come together to talk about achieving our financial independence. So we have another packed 2 hours of programming for you. But before we get going this evening, we just want to always keep Kanisha Etienne in mind. You know, her disappearance should not be in vain. And in light of Kanisha Etienne, you know, you may have heard that we recently started the Dominica Child Protection Society. So it is a group of us in Dominica and the diaspora who have come together to work up a framework that we are calling CPR. So we're looking at counseling resources, we're looking at how do we protect our children, and we're looking at the importance of reporting those cases. And we're very proud to announce that our very first initiative is up and running already. We had the author Shamina, who is the author of If You Touch, I Will Tell. We had a very generous sponsor who bought us 10 copies of those books, and she paid over $250. She would rather remain anonymous, but those books are on the way to Dominica. So we're expecting them to get to Dominica either Friday or Sunday. And the intention is to use that resource to educate our children throughout Dominica, every corner of Dominica. And we want to already thank, because it is so encouraging to see how many people have already signed up to be a part of this new society. So we want to say a special thank you, for example, to Miss Anelia Isaac from the Ready, Set, Go Summer Academy. She has already volunteered her facility as one of the locations where we'll be able to have an interactive session with her children using the book. We also want to thank Sister Valencia Webb out there at the Convent High School. She is the commissioner of the Girls Guides, and she has agreed that the Girls Guides will be a part of this association. We also want to thank the East Dominica Children Federation, who have also agreed to liaise with us, as well as Q95. You know, we can always depend on Q95 to come on board. So, for example, we recently heard one of our interviews with the head of the Children's Federation. So Q95, thank you for also pushing our information out there to ensure that we are all a part of this project. And of course, we thank the new board formed of Mr. Alvin Thomas, Dr. Margaret Wallace, Delia Cuffey, Omar Monell, Tina Bell de Ramon, who made a generous contribution, Emo News, Tanya Dixon, Clement Mosley, Annette Sanford, all of which have already agreed to be a part of this reading initiative. So, you know, child sexual abuse in Dominica, it is all of our business. It is all of our business. So we're going to continue this mission of reducing sexual abuse of our children in Dominica. So we just want to thank everyone who has come on board. This is not a red or blue issue. And if you want to be a part of our movement with helping in this cause, you can always reach me at pushpast10@gmail.com. So again, we're very excited and we're very hopeful that we will be able to make a difference in the name of Kanisha Etienne and all of our other children who are abused in Dominica. So as you will remember, 2 weeks ago, we talked about financial opportunities for this trying time. How do we generate additional income during these very difficult financial times? And as I promised, this week we will be looking at the flip side of this conversation. So while we talked about legal opportunities today, we're going to talk about illegal opportunities. So what illegal options are people in Dominica and the Caribbean region resorting to because they do not feel they have legal opportunities to earn a living? So our panel is here. We're all set and ready to go. We have Mr. Lennon Mathieu out there in Houston, Texas. We have Mr. Zidane and Johnville in the US as well. And we have Mr. Paul Barron on the ground in Dominica. So let us just take a minute and have them unmute their mics and say good evening to everyone and just introduce themselves to the conversation.
Good evening, Dr. Mathieu. Good evening to the rest of the panelists. Good evening to all the listeners in Dominica and in the diaspora. My name is Zidane Johnville, born and raised in the vibrant city of Roseau, and joining you as well in Houston, Texas. It's a pleasure to be a part of your show today.
Yes, and just tell us a little bit about you, Zidane. What do you do, and just a little bit more about you?
Of course, so I have a financial advising practice here in Houston, where I do comprehensive financial plans for personal clients and as well business owners, dealing with risk management, wealth accumulation, wealth distribution, everything that sort. So,
yes, so thank you so much for taking some time off your business schedule to be with us. Lennon?
Yes, just let me know if you can hear me clearly, but
Yes.
And thanks for having me again on your program. It's always a pleasure to share my thoughts, share my ideas. I always say I think through critical thinking, deep conversation, we find better solutions to many of our problems. And to solve our problems, it's first start with having a conversation, which it seems like we can't do these days. So just thanks for having me. Just want to say hello to listening public in Dominica and the diaspora, specifically the people of Ben, Zanzibar, and Solda, where I grew up. Good evening to you, Lambi, always there on the controls, handling business for us. Sorry if you hear some background noise. I'm still at my office. And I am not in Houston. I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Dallas.
So that's where I am. I'm in Dallas, Texas. For those who probably new joining in and have not heard me before, I am now considering myself a social activist with concern in Dominica. I prior to moving to the US, like I've said many times, but I'm going to say it again. I grew up in Benz, went to school. My dad was a school principal. My mom was a preschool teacher. Grew up, having loving family around me, 3 siblings. Went to school in Vegas in Paybush following my dad. I then went to the Portsmouth Secondary School, C4 Call, where I studied geography. I taught geography for 2 years at the Portsmouth Secondary School and also coached basketball, and then went to Midwestern State University in Texas, where I got a degree in geology, engineering, and did a minor in engineering. Currently pursuing an MBA in energy management focus. In my spare time, I love music. I played in a band a little bit. I thought I was a rock star for some time. I represented Dominica on under 19 basketball. Love sports, love music, love politics, love geography, and just trying to be all around. Paying attention to what's happening around us. So as always, happy to be here and happy to share my thoughts. And hopefully that can spur action, because at the end of the day, we can talk from January to December, but the point is to get people to wake up, stop being passive and be active in the direction that their life want to be, in the direction that our country has to go, and being a part of the development and the betterment of our country.
Yes, thank you for that, Lennon. And Paul, you're muted.
You're on mute.
Good evening to Dominicans here and abroad. My name is Paul Barron. I'm the immediate past president of the National Youth Council of Dominica. I've also served in the capacity as the chairman of the Atkinson Village Council. I have been involved in politics for now 20 years, starting at the tender age of 16. So I'm no surprise to the Dominican political landscape. As of now, I'm in private practice. I have an insurance and real estate based agency, and I also offer services in communications and digital media. I'm extremely pleased to be part of the conversation as I see every opportunity that gives young persons and young leaders a voice to bring matters of universal concerns to the larger public as an incredible one. And I want to commend Dr. Mathieu as well for continued efforts in doing so. I'm pleased to be part of the panelists, and I hope that the discussions will do justice to the topics that we have selected.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you guys for being here. And if you're just joining us again, this is Roots Connection. This is Roots Connection for today, July 27th, 2022. And this is episode number 29. And we're looking at the illegal economies of Dominica as well as the Caribbean region. If you're joining us on Facebook, we always look forward to your comments and feedback, and we always have a very passionate conversation going on Facebook if you would like to join us. So if you're listening via the radio and you would like to be a part of our Facebook conversation, you can head on over to Q95 FM radio as well as Q95 FM radio on YouTube if you do not have a Facebook account, and we're also live on Push Past 10. So this evening we are looking at from drug trafficking, human trafficking, money laundering, financial scams. This evening we are exposing the illegal economies of our Caribbean region and why the need to do so. I think we can all agree that there is a connection between illegal activities such as the drug trade, the human trafficking trade, and violence. So we have to make that connection between the illegal activities and the increase in crime, the increase in gun violence that we're seeing in Dominica. And many of us might think, well, you know what, it's not so bad. It's not as bad as some of the other Caribbean islands, but keep in mind that those same Caribbean islands probably had those thoughts at one time, that it's not as bad and enough attention wasn't paid to it. And now look at where these islands stand. So to nip it in the bud, we have to keep these conversations going. So let us say a good evening to the panel again. Of course, we say good evening to Lambie. Thank you for keeping us on the console, showing Norris, Mr. G, and the Q95 family. Thank you for the support that you give to our programming. And if always remember, if you miss any of our programs or if you're looking to listen live, you can always jump on Q95da.com. So we're going to get the ball rolling this evening. And I want to go ahead and start with Zidane. And he's going to tell us, because I think he mentioned during the last program that he was here, that he had done some research into what are the illegal operations in Dominica. So I just want him to kind of inform us of some of the research he had done back then and what he found in terms of the extent of illegal activities in Dominica. So Zidane?
Yes, well, during my time in Dominica State College, it was in, I believe, intermediate macroeconomic class, where we were tasked to do a research paper of any choosing of ours once it entails anything to do with the economy, to where we basically write, expound, do research on, and then present what we found. And I chose to do a research paper on the impact on the illicit drug trade on my island, Dominica. And within doing that research paper, the results that I found, it really took me by storm, because when you think of drugs, there's always negative connotations to it. whether it be violence, whether it be poverty, crime, depression. And although in my paper I found all these things to be true, the biggest impact I found the illicit drug trade had on Dominica was actually the monetary aspect on the drug trade itself. And I saw that apart from all other areas of research that I tried to dive into, whether it was crime rate and things of that nature, the biggest impact drugs had within the country was the flow of income moving in and out within that trade. So it really just took me aback and made me wonder if if these illegal activities are generating so much income and creating such negative impacts, then maybe we need to, I don't know, have some form of a different approach in order to turn these illegal activities to probably legal activities and turn those negative impacts to positive impacts. And it just really made me wonder, you know.
Yes, absolutely. Let's go over to Paul because Paul, you're actually in Dominica. So, what are you seeing on the ground? What can you bring to the fore for us today? Muted.
It's interesting that you would ask that, and Zidane, I think you did a real excellent job in on underline the discipline that would best address illegal activities of that sort, or what is termed as the underground economy, and it is really a matter of macro and microeconomics to a great extent. The illegal activities or the underground economy, as I will refer to it as, is very closely linked to the economy, the state of economy, economic growth, and lack of growth thereof. What you will find in most cases is that where it means that there are little or no opportunities for persons to generate income or be gainfully employed in the legal settings by way of finding a job, the most lucrative options that are then presented would be to engage in some illegal activity. And it is not only limited to the drug trade. However, in most cases, that is what is seemingly more popular in Dominica. What it means, therefore, is that the deficiency of jobs would allow only for persons to find reasons to make quick cash for obvious reasons, because they have to take care of themselves and their families. It is not that I am condoning the activities, it's only that it is the only likely option that is available to them. It doesn't spell anything good for us and for families and for the country at whole, because what it means, therefore, is that it puts us in a negative stance. It allows only for continued broken families, because as you would imagine, excluding if you exclude the legal basis by which an activity is done, it becomes an illegal activity, and in turn places pressure on families by meaning young men, young women ending up in prison, and which places a greater challenge for our society. And of course, in most cases where you find matters needed to be resolved, it always almost involves violence, as we are now seeing popping up in our society with the rise of gun violence. If you trace every activity, every incident, if you do a sufficient background investigation, you will find that those persons would most likely be involved in some illegal activity. So it's nothing good for Dominica, and it's nothing to be proud of. And we really have to look at ways at which we can address that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Lennon, over to you.
So Simone, when you invited me to have this conversation, I thought about it for a little bit, and it's interesting that Zidane brought up that perspective. The illegal economics is nothing new. It's by no means unique to Dominica, and ever since the dawn of human civilization, there's always been a struggle between good and evil. There's always been a struggle between what is good and what is bad. Sometimes that is defined by religion. Sometimes that is defined by our politics, our social cohesiveness, our communities. And we have seen illegal economies throughout human history. The biggest one is the slave trade. Back in the days, we as Black people are in the Caribbean because of human trafficking. But guess what? When it first started, it wasn't illegal. It only became illegal because the abolitionists realized that we are all human beings, and as Black people, as Africans, we also have a right to be free and a right to life. And therefore, the legal slave trade became illegal, and there was a lot of friction during that transition point. In the U.S., there was bootlegging. There were guys who used to do what we call almost Zaid in Dominica, moonshine, and that at one point during Prohibition was illegal, based on the rules and the laws in America, and people took prison time for brewing illegal booze. Eventually, when Prohibition ended, the boot runners actually was the NASCAR races we see right now in America is as a result of these guys who used to do the rum running from state to state. So that's another example of some point in our human civilization where illegal activity based on the social acceptance changed to something legal and had positive influence on the society. The NASCAR is huge. There's economic activity in NASCAR, and a lot of people don't realize that what it is. Today, we've seen where marijuana had been criminalized with racist roots back in, I can't remember the exact decade, but back then, with the race issues going up in America, there were the upper classes of society that decided to brand marijuana as an illegal drug because Mexicans and Blacks were using it in fear of people of a different color and different race. It became illegal. Today, what are we seeing in places like Colorado and some of the states? Marijuana has been legalized, and there is immense economic activity generated from the byproducts of marijuana, which is a natural plant and a natural herb. So through the course of history, we have seen things that were once illegal become legal, and things that were once legal become illegal based on society's acceptance, society's evolution, and frankly, the mind of the people and the time. So these things reflect the time. So illegal economics by no means is unique to Dominica. This has been around from dawn of days. And what happens is, as I said earlier, there's always that battle between good and evil. And it's a balancing act because sometimes there are competing interests. For example, we in the marijuana trade, and some things are made illegal by governments because they can't collect taxes and revenues from those activities. There are some things that are made legal because now the leaders have devised a plan through the social agreement, through the government agreement, that, hey, we're going to legalize this, but this is what has to happen. We have to tax it. So it's a very tricky subject when you talk about illegal economies and Dominican, why it's increasing. The reason why I said there's always a battle between good and evil, because there are some motivating factors which Paul Barron, one of them he mentioned, that cause people to get into crime. And one of them, as we also always know, is it's called a positive factor. It's social and economic positions, poverty, corruption. These kind of things can drive people into economies that are not conventional and are otherwise illegal. There are things like the classical reason where people just decide they like the excitement, the energy, the adventure, and get involved in this. There are also structural issues that cause people to get into illegal activities, and also ethical reasons that get people into illegal activities. And some of these we can talk about later. But the listening public should understand by no means is illegal economics is something new. It's not unique to Dominica, and every society, every civilization at one point in time had to deal with this underground economy or illegal economy, as you call it.
Yes, thank you, Lennon. So I think what we're already seeing is this is certainly not a black and white issue where we can simply say, well, this is illegal and this is legal, because as you so poignantly showed us, that some events were considered, some activities were considered illegal and now are considered legal. But what is causing the escalation of illegal activities where people are looking for illegal options to make ends meet? I think that is an important question. So that is the question I want to throw out to you guys this evening. But before we do, let us make sure that we're acknowledging that our Facebook Live audience is coming in. So we see Jennifer Fidel Johnson. Thank you for being here. Judith Cochran, Medina Sandhouse, my mom, always great to have you on board. Dorian Dorival, thank you for being here. So as you come in, don't forget to share the live and let everyone know that we are here for another episode of Roots Connections on Q. So what is driving more and more people to pursue illegal opportunities? Paul, you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I'd very much like to. What I have been doing for a while now, I should say to the listening public that I'm a student of economics and sociology. It means, therefore, that these two disciplines gives a very good understanding of where we are now, from an economic perspective and also from a sociological one. What I've noticed is that the increase in activity, because those activities, as Lennon rightly said, Dominica is not immune to it, and in most cases, it is even suggested in some economies that it is a necessary evil, as good as he said, as he rightly said, the battle between good and bad. It is not that we are accepting that this sort of thing should go on in Dominica unwarranted, but what we need to understand is that because we are in what we and Dominica is facing as most parts of the world, but in our case it is even more severe, economic depression. What that means, therefore, is that there's a lack of opportunities. The economy is not moving at the pace at which we would like it to, in order to absorb talent and absorb new entrants into the economy by way of employment, being gainful employment, or by way of open up new business, either for foreign direct investments or entrepreneurship, local entrepreneurship. Now, in the absence of that, we might find that persons will look at the next best option, understanding that there are certain risks, it's risk adverse, but still the pressures of taking care of their family and meeting their domestic needs far outweighs the decision to get engaged in illegal activities. So it is really on a climb, and what we're seeing now is that it's spiking, and it is becoming very evident in our society. Hence the reason that we're experiencing such outrageous gun violence incidences, which is always with certainty linked to gang violence or the illegal drug trade. I believe uh, economic prosperity, the challenge for governments is that economic prosperity, and in most cases the economics must there will always there's always the need to make it equitable and fairly distributed among the population. So what you see in Dominica happening is that uh, there's a certain class of persons that are becoming wealthier for obvious reasons, and we know that to be the political class. And those persons are closely associated to the administration, having benefited from various contract, various opportunities to work, and the likes. In Dominica, we have a shrinking middle class. So the middle class is closely becoming integrated with the working class, or the lower class, or the upper lower class, if you want to consider it. Where you find the mass of persons existing, and that is in the working class, that is where there are huge cases of unemployment. And what does that mean? It involves Dominica's youth. It involves Dominica's prime energy and talent, by which we should now be leveraging against the better interests of our country. So because there's this huge unemployment, and the illegal drug trade is seemingly more attractive than trying to find a job or giving up altogether. You find more persons are entering that, because I mean, it's no surprise if you're in Dominica. I'm in Dominica. When you go around, you see the drug lords, the drug dealers living extremely wealthy and very affluent lifestyles to a young man who is depressed and not having a job may very well be that might very well be his next option. So for obvious reasons, we're not here to water down or to sugarcoat anything as it relates to Dominica, because we have a shared interest for the country's development. So on the economic side of it is that there's an increase in unemployment, which is forcing persons to enter the illegal drug trade. And from a sociological perspective, it is the attitudes of individuals towards advancing themselves relatively fast or relatively quicker than they would obviously wait to ride out the storm. The question we have to pose or to ponder on is, uh, if Dominica was far more developed or far more experiencing a far more economic growth, would there be the need for that? And there are societies who have stamped out or lessened the impacts of the underground economy, and Lennon pointed to some of that. If you bolster your economy, if you increase with a focus of increasing economic growth over a period of time, then slowly it dissipates. But what we're seeing in Dominica is the reverse effect, and they're left with very little choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to go back to something you said before, Lennon, because I don't want us to, turn a blind eye because we talked about, some things were legal at one point, some things were illegal at one point, and now they're legal. So, I mean, should we just be turning a blind eye and say, well, maybe potentially this could become legal at some point, so we ought not to be too concerned about it?
No, not necessarily. The reason why I brought that up is because, sometimes we have a discussion of a moment in time, not understanding the context in which it is. And I brought up the fact that historically, because illegal economies have never gone away, they've always been there. And even in good times, in prosperous times, even in nations where economies are great, there is still underground and illegal activities based on what the laws and rules says. And Paul is absolutely right. But the point is, like everything else, you have to put a lead on these activities.
Right.
We, as human beings, we are not perfect, and that struggle of good and evil is always there. There are people who get into illegal activities because they are forced by their social conditions. Not enough economic activity. We trying to live up to the Johnsons. And one of the things I absolutely don't like is when there is comparison to other countries. We have murders, but it's less than other countries. And I think that is like a precursor of not doing anything. So I don't like that categorization. I think if we have an increase in Dominica, we have an increase in Dominica, and we need to do something about it. But the reason why I'm saying that is because of that struggle of good and evil. There comes a point. The point is to minimize that illegal activity as much as possible. And how do you do that? You do that by building an economic engine that provides growth and development for every young person, every citizen. You do that by putting systems in place that helps a young guy who decides he's going to graduate from college, but you know what? I can get out of school, I can get a decent job, I can buy a piece of property, I can build my house, I can raise 2 kids and not have to struggle. We can do that by stamping out corruption in our society, because according to United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, corruption is one of the biggest cause of the underground activity and illegal activity of taking root in a country. And once that corruption expands, then what we are probably seeing in Dominica, the increase in the murders, the increase in the gun violence, is a fruit of the corruption that has been brewing in Dominica over the past few years. So these are some of the things. So I brought that up to say that illegal activity and illegal economics have always been there. Based on what Zidane said, why can't we turn that into something positive? So my point was to let him know that these things have happened in the past. It's not unique. But the point is, it gets to a point where it's out of control. And that is where we get into the amount of gun violence we have in Dominica, the amount of drug trade. As a matter of fact, in the 1980s, in Miami. Miami was known as the cocaine economics because they had so much cocaine coming into Miami at some point. That money was getting into the banking system. It was getting into the financial system. That the joke was Miami was the cocaine capital of the world because the money infiltrated. But here's the most important thing: something is deemed illegal because one, it affects somebody else. And the reason why I brought up the slave trade is because at the time, trafficking black people into the Caribbean and elsewhere in the world was okay. But guess what it did? It built the wealth of Europe, right? And only after people realize, well, it's affecting other human beings. So why is something deemed illegal? It's deemed illegal because the drug trade has real effects on other human beings. And the idea is if you are generating some economic activity or income activity, it should not cost the life of anybody. It should not cost the environment or destroy any living organisms. That's why I think most of the things are deemed illegal and it's difficult to make them into legal trade. So that's the perspective I brought when I mentioned that stuff. Not that I'm saying, oh, it's been happening a long time, it's okay. The point is it has to be controlled. And how it's controlled is by putting systems in place, cutting up the corruption, teaching ethics in our school, having a good, our Dominica is a Christian society, the morals we have been taught of being kind, being respectful, don't be envious of other people's stuff, don't be greedy, stop being jealous of other people's stuff. These are some of the human traits that cause us to get into illegal activity or do stuff that is unethical. And that's the perspective I was bringing when I mentioned that.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Lennon. And I can already hear our Q95 audience because I know our audience very well. And coming over to you, Zidane, I think many of us would think, well, the corruption comes from the top. When we hear cases of the Premier of the British Virgin Islands, Andrew Fahey, being arrested on drug trafficking charges, and when we look at even Dominica, where we see no bid contracts and we see this massive amount of monies being allocated to the same set of so-called friends of the Prime Minister, I think a lot of us start to wonder, well, if it's coming from the top, what do we expect the average citizen in Dominica to pursue? So what are your thoughts on that?
Before moving forward and speaking, I just want to condemn the illicit drug trade and other illegal activities within the island. However, you speak of the top, but listening to Lennon, I definitely want to speak from the bottom first.
Yes.
And from the youth's perspective. We talk about, we try to condemn, it's right to condemn the illicit drug trade. Let's not just as yet condemn the people within the illicit drug trade. And I say that because we condemned Jesus, and then we made a whole religion out of him. They condemned marijuana in the US, and now it's turning legal in states like Colorado, California, things like that. So let's not condemn the people. And I say that because when we look at the youth, before condemning them, let's try to understand the perspective as to what is happening and why it's happening. And I say perspective because, as I said at the starting, the research paper that I did made me gather a different perspective when it comes to the illicit drug trade in Dominica. So speaking from that perspective, when you look at the youth in Dominica, I believe that they are just opportunistic people. And I'm trying to be as positive as possible when I say they are opportunistic people. Now, when you have an influx of opportunistic people in an economy that is deemed stagnant, what do you expect? We must pose that question to ourselves and to the society. What do we expect? We have opportunistic people in a society where within the legal economy or legal society, there is no room for growth. There is no room for entry, much less for growth. So what do? They become opportunistic. They move into areas to where they can thrive. These areas just happen to be illegal trades, which again I condemn. However, we need to understand their perspectives first. And then Lennon also mentioned the government not being able to tax the illicit drug trade within the economy. However, we must not we must not throw a blind eye to the amount of taxation that the drug dealers and people within the drug economy pay. When we look at people within the drug world, people who sell drugs, they can't put their money in the bank. If you have to look at the entire society on the whole, when it comes to working class people going do an 8 to 5 job, they put their money in the bank, and it is less liquid than that of the drug dealers. The drug dealers spend more within um, legal aspects of the economy. They go to the shops more, they go to the bars more, they go out more. That's VAT right there. So we cannot say that the government is not receiving tax or is not receiving any type of funds from the illicit drug trade, because the illicit drug trade is probably where, when it comes to VAT, they get the most revenue from. That's just a thought and a perspective there.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, you look like you want to jump in.
You know, that one of the reasons I like discussions like that is, of course, it provides you a variety, a great, how you call it, separation of thoughts as you want to consider it. And I really hear what you're saying, Zidane, with respect to not turning a blind eye to young persons who have no choice. And I believe you've rightly identified that they have no choice. But what I would want to think ultimately is that we want to provide an environment which is conducive enough for young persons to be gainfully employed and not run the risk of being involved in the illegal drug trade, because the implications therefore for society is far reaching. And in most cases you always have to look at uh, the the end results of any sort of trade of be it illegal or not, but involving lives and livelihoods. And to place individuals in a position that they're left with no choice but to be engaged in an illegal drug trade is not a healthy exercise for any society or any economy, because we very well understand that the fallout and the negative implications therefore will be far costlier than it is if it was condoned. With respect to what Lennon was suggesting in terms of the positive implications that can arise out of an illegal drug trade exercise, we have only one area at which we can see that being achieved, and that is with marijuana. Cocaine is not a good drug. It is not to be advertised. It's not to be used. It's not to be condoned and let free on the streets of our country, because it destroys minds, and we know that. Marijuana on another spectrum provides a more what you call lucrative option if it is being legalized. But we know that it would involve a number of processes whereby we can arrive at that position. To believe, I think Dominica has taken a first step by decriminalizing marijuana. Of course, it has to go a lot further to legalize it, and there's many more discussions that the stakeholders would want to have in order to arrive at that position. Uh, we have to understand that the underground economy is not only limited to just drugs, and that is important. I think the discussion is around drugs, and maybe I should help by leading it in a different direction,
Absolutely.
if you'd allow me, Simone.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
agree with that. I was just going to
Yes.
get to that point.
Yes. We
In
will go in. We will go in there.
Thank you. In economics, it is known that you'll have to excuse me. My daughter is joining in. I
Yes,
didn't want
that's
to.
okay.
She wants my attention, but I she wants to sit on me, but I don't think it's possible. I'll be with you with that. Just a minute, okay? Here you go. Uh, what I want to begin to point to is the question of corruption, huh?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the question of corruption is something that is not immune to any society. However, it is the effects of it is far-reaching when you have a small country like Dominica. And I always like to look at I'll be with you, sweetheart. I'll be with you. Just a minute, okay? I always like to look at Dominica on the basis of its population, and its population is very small. And I
You
may
wanna
have
you
to
wanna
take that
attend to
topic
in a
later.
minute and come back? Attend to
Yes, I'd
and
like
come
to
back.
come
We'll,
back
we'll,
on
we'll
that.
be right
Yeah,
here. Yes, yes,
sure.
we'll be right here. Yes, so Lennon, you wanted to jump in, but I
Yeah.
just want to make sure I piggyback on what Zidane said, that where it has to be an opportunistic situation. Because think about it, recently we had 400 students graduate from the Dominica State College. Do we have an economy in Dominica that can absorb in terms of gainful unemployment for all 400 of the students? So Zidane is absolutely correct when he says that the lack of opportunity creates an opportunistic situation where by all means necessary, people have to find a way to create an income for themselves.
Well, let me. I wouldn't call it opportunistic. I'll call it ambitious to be on the positive
Mhm.
side. Opportunistic has a negative sort of connotation to it.
Connotation, that's right.
It's ambitious. Dominicans are generally ambitious people. They want to do stuff. They want to work hard. That's why we left. I mean, we didn't. Personally, I didn't leave so that I can turn my back on Dominica. That's why I'm still here. We're looking for something better for ourselves. We work hard, and when we out there, we excel because of our work attitude and our work ethics. And then I want to make it clear that I don't condone illegal activity or drugs, especially the abuse. That let's make it clear: the abuse of drugs. And the reason why I mention this is because we talking about illegal economics, and people have to understand this is not nothing new. This has been around for the dawn of days. That's my point. But yes, it's true that the drug dealers fuel the economy and they pay taxes. But the end means the end result doesn't always justify the means. And I said the biggest reason and the reason why I brought up the slave trade is because at the time slavery was okay. But at the end of the day, they were using other human beings to build the wealth of Europe. Because what we're talking about really and truly is economics. We are discussing economics.
That is
The,
correct.
the slave trade built Europe because they were trafficking human beings from Africa. They were selling human beings, and it was fine. Eventually, they realized that you cannot build your wealth on the back of somebody else. Force them into labor, force them into slavery while you become wealthy. Today, some of the drug trade, what is related to the drug trade, because there is, and believe it or not, the same moral, the same moral and ethical characters that guide us in a legal society also happens in an illegal society. Guess what? Because the reason why drug dealers are taking revenge on one another is because somebody did them something. So what it tells me is even within the illegal trade, there is a need to act correctly. You understand what I'm saying?
Precisely.
The,
Precisely.
the problem is it's not under a controlled society, so they take laws into their own hands, and there is what they call street justice. So instead of going for a court and hearing a system, they execute, which is actually judgment and punishment at the same time. In a society that is structured, that is stable, we have a court system, we have a justice system, and all that stuff. And that is where Paul, I was happy you diverted a little bit.
Yeah, and
Be-
I wanted to jump back on what he was talking about.
Yes, and I wanted to make that clear. I'm just having, we have to have this deep conversation. But when we talk about illegal economies, it's not only the drug trade. The article I mentioned, the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime, talk about extortion. It also has to do with money. It talk about racketeering. We heard about that in Dominica, in the offices. It talk about loan sharking. These are criminal activity. It talk about bribery and extortion, money laundering. These are also criminal activity. And also the liability of the legal process. And there's also a link between organized crime and corruption. So while we are talking about the drug dealers, which is what we want to get into, it says corruption is described in generic term as the use of public office for private gain or the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. It subverts legitimate governmental process, misspends public money, and undermines public confidence in government. What I think we don't realize is in a society, in a country, the reason we have a government, we have a parliament, is because we agree to exist under a certain set of rules and laws. And something may be a crime in one society, like it's still a crime to carry marijuana and ship marijuana in Dominica, whereas it's not in Colorado, because our representatives are sent there by us to decide on the rules of our coexistence. Certain things are made illegal. So when we break those rules, it becomes a crime. Therefore, it's important that when there is corruption in the government and there is extortion, there is racketeering, there is money laundering, this is just as criminal as the drug dealers who are dealing drugs, because they are breaking the agreement that we all agree to coexist in, for lack of a better word. You get what I'm saying? So what it boils down to is the guys in power have the economic advantage. They have the power of the purse, they have the power of the security of the state. When they set bad examples and they break the law, then there's a breakdown in that social fabric. There is instability. And remember what I said earlier, is putting a lead on that illegal economic activity. All of a sudden, the society breaks down. So what you see happening, if there is illegal activity in the government, there is illegal economies going on in the natural public. So you see things like drugs, you see things like kidnapping, you see things like extortion, you see things like racketeering, you see things like money laundering. All these are linked basically to how I can grab an economic advantage. But what we're doing is we are breaking the agreement which we have agreed upon through the parliament to coexist. That's what it is.
Yeah, and let me have, if you don't mind, Leonard, let me have Paul jump in while Culture is giving him a little bit of a break. Hopefully he can jump in.
Yeah, Culture is, she wants me to pick her up, man.
Oh.
I'm so sorry, guys. Yeah,
Yes.
her mom will be home in the next few minutes. I really want to spend some time on this topic.
Yes, well, you want to attend to her until her mom comes and then you'll come back?
Yeah, she'll be home in the next few minutes.
Yes, so spend some time with her, and then when her mom comes back, come back on with us. So just keep your camera and your mic off for now.
Sounds good. Thank you.
It's the beauty of being a parent. I understand.
Oh my, yeah. Thank you.
So in the meantime, Zidane, let me come over to you because, as a young man who was just recently in Dominica, I mean, you only left a couple of years to go to school. Did you get a sense that your peers were comparing their lives and what they had attained in life compared to maybe what they were seeing the politicians had acquired and how they were able to acquire it, and figuring out, well, if I'm not going to be a politician and be able to amass this wealth, what are the other options? Because I do think that we look at the people that we look up to and we compare our lives to them, and then we figure out, well, how can I have a similar lifestyle?
Well, again, exactly how you structured that question, we brought in politicians with wealth. Mm-hmm. The problem is neither politician nor wealth. The problem is why is wealth only associated with a limited amount of things like politics or things of that nature? And that's why I talk about opportunity, Lennon. And like I said from the start, I am condemning the illegal drug trade as well. I do not condone it at all. But you spoke about the slave trade. When you bring about the slave trade was legal. However, it was not moral, right? Mm-hmm. And like you said, the drug trade has been there from the dawn of time, and as well, the slave trade was there for many, many years. And it was only after the abolition of slavery, where, again, it was morally wrong, where we saw the shift from the cotton plantations, which is really what the slaves were there for. It was the same people. It was the same black people coming from Africa to the Caribbean, working in the slave plantations, yielding cotton, morally wrong, within legal aspects, legal rights, but morally wrong. After abolition, the people went from cotton to banana, where legally we thrived as a banana economy in Dominica for many, many years. So again, I'm just trying to bring about a different perspective, looking at the illicit drug trade. I am condemning it. I do not condone it. However, as you stated, it's been there for the dawn of time. So maybe we need to take a step back and really look at what it is that we have, what it is that the drug trade is, and try to get a different perspective. And with a different perspective, we can get a different way of solving it. because, like I said before, just like we can move from the plantation fields yielding cotton, which was morally wrong, legally right, to bananas, where we thrived as a people, we could probably move the people from the illicit drug trades to other opportunities and spread the wealth from not just politicians, but to other aspects within the economy where we could really create opportunities for young people.
Yeah, thank you, Zidane. So, Lennon, so our politicians are a role model. Do we look at them and think, well, wow, this is a really nice gig to be a politician, but since I don't have that options, what options can I pursue to be able to live like a politician?
Well, like I said, we exist in a community through rules and laws. If we don't if we don't have those rules and laws, typically there will be anarchy. So the politicians um, are there to decide how we disperse the production or the wealth of the society. So in a community, we pay taxes, we do certain things as a society, and the politicians decide how best we can spread that equitably, either through choices, chances, creating the opportunities, creating that economic growth, that engine that gives everyone the opportunity to succeed. And I think we're in the same place, Zidane, probably just looking at it, slightly differently. But that is why we have governments. And when you look at the different system of governments, when you look at the basics, that's what it boils down to. Who controls the money? Who controls the wealth? Who makes the decision? And if you look at societies where they are autocrats, the reason why they are brutal is because they want to control the wealth to prevent somebody else from deciding what to do with that money. That's what it is. I mean, speaking in layman terms. So if you're in a society like Dominica, where we have a system of government and a parliament that is supposed to meet right now, there is budget to decide how we are distributing, dispersing, and using the funds of the country. And it's not used to give the young people and people an equal opportunity for growth. And at the same time, we see them and hear them in things like money laundering. We hear them in corruption. We see evidence of government officials using that country's state resources for their own personal gains. What it does, it sets a bad precedence and a bad example to the young folks. So therefore, the reason why I talked about extortion and loan sharking and money laundering, these are also illicit forms of economic activity. Then the young people are going to see the option as well. The governments are doing it, they're getting away with it, so I can deal in drugs. And it's another form of raising funds and economic activity. So there is that socioeconomic pressure. There's that pressure for people to get involved in those illegal activities. I also mentioned, like I said, in the past there were situations where, and this which is what you were asking, Zidane, there were situations where in the bootleg industry in the US and prohibition, eventually when the laws got cut off, it spawned into NASCAR. NASCAR is a huge multi-billion-dollar industry. You see what I'm saying? So I get what you're saying, but at the same time, we live within a society and we have a set rules and laws. Now, if we want to change the system, then we have to go through the structure in place, which is the parliament, to decide the laws. For example, we want to make marijuana legal for use, which is kind of what you're talking about. So instead of shipping boatloads of marijuana elsewhere, we can turn it into a valuable product and using that economic activity that can generate revenue for young people, that can generate the economic activity. And then they don't have to get on a boat and try to go, Guadeloupe or wherever the case may be. That's what I'm talking about. So I think as leaders in a country, there has to be some example so that the youth can follow. And at the same time, there has to be responsible use of the resources that's being shared, so people have the equal opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, yes, go ahead, Zidane.
Well, Lennon said that he think we share different views, but I think do share the same views.
That's what I said. The same views.
Uh,
We're
I
just
was
looking at it from a different angle. I
Slightly
think.
different.
exactly, and that's really my what I hope to achieve here is trying to get it from a different angle. I was never speaking in regards to legalizing marijuana per se. I was more or less trying to throw emphasis on, just like we moved from the cotton fields to banana productions, not really just legalizing marijuana, but probably creating different avenues in order for the youth to succeed. Because, like Dr. Mathieu rightly said, there's so much limited places and limited jobs in Dominica to where you could legally generate wealth. We spoke about politicians, doctors, lawyers, things like that. But probably creating a society where there are different arenas, different areas to where the youth could go and as well succeed and create the same amount of wealth as if they were to be in the illicit drug trade. Maybe then we would see a decrease in so much people engaging in those activities.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your insight so far. We're going to take a quick break, take a sip of water, take a deep breath. When we come back, we're talking human trafficking. Let's take the conversation in a slightly different direction. Let's talk about human trafficking and let us talk about the strategic location of the Caribbean as well as Dominica as a transshipment point for a lot of criminal activity. So let's take a break while Lambi invites our callers to join in on the conversation, and I head on over to Facebook to see what we are talking about.
You're listening to Roots on Connection on Q95. We're taking your calls now. The numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. Let me run those numbers one more time. 449-3095-9697, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. We're standing by for your calls.
Yes, thank you for that, Lambi. And let's see, on Facebook, we have Dorian who says, greetings to all looking to take in much as I can. And Judith who says, great discussion as usual. Thank you for that. Anithia, blessed evening to the panel, victorious as God's plan. The question is who, what created the avenue for opportunistic people to thrive and why? So guys, just take kind of notes on some of the questions you may want to answer when we come back to you. Annette Phillip, great to see you. It's still not the way to go because they still die from being in drugs and gangs despite they paying taxes. Dominic, victorious as God, Dominica is too small for this level of corruption. And she also says the 400 graduates will not return to Dominica. Of course, if they have an opportunity to migrate, right? They have been exported, all expenses paid, and there is a reason. And Nixie Alfred, great to see you. And she says Dominicans aren't just ambitious, but highly intelligent. We are privileged to have a plethora of intellectuals. Thank you for that. Victorious. Well, if the leaders are corrupt, the laws in parliament will be attended to facilitate their corruptions rather than to allow for growth, opportunities, and production of the citizens. This is well noted in the country. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your contributions as we get back to the panel and we continue our discussion. Don't forget, if you're on Facebook, don't forget to share the live. Let everyone know that we are here for yet another engaging conversation. So Paul, do you have an opportunity to speak with us now? Is mom home?
No, but I gave her something to eat. I might be able to buy 5 minutes.
Yes. So you were talking about corruption and some of the thoughts you wanted to share.
Yeah, what I'd like to point to is the blatant truth is that Dominica is becoming a haven for crimes. Okay. and all these crimes seemingly is tied very closely to corrupt practices. And the viewers are very right to suggest that if there's corruption in our public offices, it will trickle down in the societies. In the same vein, if young persons see and perceive something as being acceptable, they seemingly will follow the path and sort of work towards achieving those ideals. Corruption, of course, is not immune to any one society. But of course, I always look at Dominica on the basis of its population and the size of the country and that which it is light years ahead of other more developed nations as far as corruption is concerned. Now we're not the only ones who are seeing that Dominica is a corrupt nation. It is being magnified throughout the international community, and there are serious concerns by different organizations of whether or not Dominica is on the right path, and and whether or not public officers are. I'm so sorry, culture is not allowing me to go through tonight.
Yes, yes. Give her a minute.
I'd have to apologize. I'm
No, no, no,
sorry.
no need to apologize. You're a
Yeah.
father, and we're very proud of you that you
She
don't
wants to
feel like
sit
you're
on me.
babysitting. You're
She
taking
wants
care
to
of your daughter.
She wants to sit on me. And
Maybe
that's what it is.
maybe try sitting on your lap and see if it works. I don't
Trust
mind.
me.
I don't mind. Hi, culture. Hi, sweetie. Okay, let's see if it works. Try now.
Yeah, I'm sure she just wants to be part of the conversation.
Yes, try again.
So-
Let's try.
The international community is looking at Dominica and seeing it for what it is. Dominica is becoming a haven for crimes, not to mention some of what we have mentioned, but also financial crimes. And financial crimes is one area that is closely monitored throughout the international and law enforcement organizations. And because of that, by engaging and continuing to fuel those practices, we are under the radar. And it is really no surprise. Even with respect to our own citizenship by investment program, we have seen that some of the persons who are able to gain access to our nationhood by way of passports are also using that to facilitate criminal activities. And we have had, however, a little of which Dominicans have heard of it, but there are men and women who have been pursued on that very basis by having nationhood and being involved in criminal activities. We also want to underscore, as the individuals, one of your guests points to, that Parliament is people need to look at Parliament very carefully, because the laws that are passed in Parliament are passed for specific purpose, and you have to wonder why some laws are not passed in Parliament while others are debated feverishly. And there are many laws that have been passed throughout the 20 years span that seeks to accommodate certain what you call white collar crimes. It creates a conducive environment whereby persons can seamlessly manipulate the system. Now, in economics, rent seeking is very popular. Yes, with that, among public officials on the basis that there's always a evidence of bribery. Now, it would be interesting for you to know that the IMF have done a lot of studies where it points to capital projects, high infrastructure projects, exorbitantly large airports, and these types of projects as an opportunity for public officials to cash in. For example, why isn't a lot of money being spent on education rather than other types of infrastructure projects? Because in taking on these large projects, there's a greater likelihood, or it's much easier to benefit from rent-seeking activities, which is bribery. So Dominicans have to be very careful to consider when they see these types of projects being advertised to the public. While the intentions are for the population to benefit, it does not negate the fact that there are many men and women who will line their pockets as a result of that.
Yes, and thank you, Culture, for giving Daddy a break. Okay, mute. Paul. We'll see if we can come back to you. Thank you, Culture. Lennon, you wanted to say something?
I was just agreeing with him because it's the same thing I read earlier with corruption. It's basically public office for private gain. And what it really is who is getting the larger share of the spoils of the society. That's what it is. Our government is there. The taxes really we collect it's from the citizens, and we put these people in there to manage how that is spent for the benefit of everyone. And when those in charge decide, well, because I am the prime minister, because I'm the president, I can charge exorbitant fees irrespective of what the law says. And when those that believe because they are in charge of the parliament, they can use it for their own personal gain, which is what Paul is talking about. And there are those who have access to all that wealth and that economy can do as they please, then that is not equitable. That is corruption to the highest degree. And what it does, it trickles to the society. And when the wider society realizes, well, we put in money here, this is our resources, it's not being equitable, that forces the other people here, well, if they're doing it, then I have to find other means to accommodate my wealth and my income. And that's where the drug trade comes in. So that's why I said earlier, the increase in the gun violence, the increase in the violence we see there is a direct result or a fruit of the corruption. It's a meter or measuring stick of how corrupt our society is. And that is just the result. So we are seeing the result. Although we say we can, there's no evidence, but there is suspicions. There is things that we can see in the society that's not right. And then when these things are allowed to fester, then the wider society who is already struggling, who doesn't have jobs, who doesn't have economic activity, who has to live to make up a living for themselves, who's pressured by society's qualifier for what is success, what is wealth, to get that house. At this point, you're going to take a loan and it will take you 40 years and you're still broke. So it's easy when you're in that circumstance, it's easy to fall to the pressures of the illegal trade, the illegal economics, the underground world. So all those things they mesh, and that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and it begs the question, Zidane, why doesn't fear of getting arrested deter the average person from pursuing illegal opportunities?
Well, if we were to hypothetically create two societies, one to where you would get $100 for doing X amount of work legally, and the other where you would get $100 for doing same X amount of work for illegal activities, I believe that everyone that has a choice would choose to go the legal route without hesitation. So we really have to ask ourselves, what is wrong with our society to where so many people choose the illegal route and go down that rabbit hole? So we really have to scope our society as a whole. And I think, in part, to answer your question, when it comes to the youth, when given so little opportunity and being less risk averse than the elders within our community, then they would quicker resort to going towards things of the illicit drug trade and other illicit avenues within our society in order to create means of living, simply just create means of living and to survive.
Yes, same question, Lennon, your thoughts?
I think it's risk reward. The chances of you getting caught become slimmer and slimmer when your society is corrupt, when the courts are not doing their work, when the police officers are themselves corrupt, when politicians are mingling with known criminals, and some people can get away without the system, the structures working. So there is risk reward. It's like doing business. I will take a chance in an investment, but there's a chance that I'm going to fail. But you know what? I'm going to take that chance anyway because I might make it. You understand what I'm saying? Just like we buy the lottery ticket. We buy the lottery ticket because it's $270 million. Holy crap. I don't buy lottery, but the US lottery now is 800 and something $1 million.
Yep.
Guess what? On my way, I'm gonna buy a ticket because there's a chance. You understand what I'm saying? So that's what makes us human. So
Right.
and Dylan is right. If you were given the option of I can make $3,000 as a teacher or $3,000 dealing drug, guess what? We would do $3,000 as a teacher easy. But when there is that pressure on you and you like, well, I know teachers who have been working for 17 years, they're not appointed. They can't build their own homes. And some people may get into the drug trade because they're like, you know what, I'm gonna do it for a little bit because I need a start.
Mm-hmm.
So the reward, the risk reward, the chances of you getting caught is not that high. So they may get in there, just to get, the start, and they get sucked in, they get hooked, and it continues because the society, the legal system has not changed to increase their wealth potential. So they get back into the situation because they have to live up to that standard. So this is just one of the reasons. I think there are many other reasons, but he's absolutely right because that pressure,
Yeah, he
that's
is.
what is there.
Yeah, and I know, Paul, you have a lot to say. Hopefully, culture will give you an opportunity too. But I also think it is maybe one of the reasons that we're seeing the number of murders increasing in Dominica.
It's the
Because how
same.
many of the cases have we seen being
It's-
solved and the person prosecuted?
It's
I'm
the
happy.
same. It's the same reason. It's the
I'm
same.
happy. I'm happy that you both mentioned that because you cannot look at the problem of the underground economy in absence of the legal framework by which it's supposed to in fact serve as a mitigating factor. Because, for example, we would not have in Dominica gun violence is unheard of as of recent time. And what it means, therefore, is that because there's so many incidences, now there's a sort of reactionary effort by the legal system in order to address it. But what we should consider is that should we have waited for it to get to that point? The public outcry, and I don't see it as being extremely loud. I don't hear Dominicans very passionate about addressing our current situation as it regards gun violence. It is very, how do you say, it's common knowledge these days to know who has a pistol and who doesn't have a pistol. Dominica is a very small, neated community, and nothing goes unseen, so to speak. Where we are now is that it has gotten to a point where it is just being condoned. It has become a normal way of life in the Commonwealth of Dominica, and it took a period of 20 years to arrive at that point. By the very reasons that persons see leaders as friends and counterparts and colleagues with notorious drug leaders and persons involved in these types of illegal activities. Uh, um, the level of those crimes find themselves in our financial systems. Nobody turns you away if you bring a sizable amount and somewhat seek to justify your source of income, even if it raises a red flag. So what we're continuing to see in Dominican, I want to make it fundamentally clear that in no way do I support these illegal activities, and I'm not trying to rationalize any reason for them to exist. Therefore, we are in a very unfortunate position in Dominica right now, and it is something that has to be addressed because if it is not addressed, it is going to result in the loss of lives. It's going to result in broken families, and we always have to realize that when somebody gets involved in crime, whether financial, whether drug, whether the other ways, the blatant truth is that it becomes a cost to society. It becomes a cost for every one of us. If you look at the incidents of sexual child abuse, every parent now is very fearful of their daughter. I have a daughter, I have to be fearful as well. You see, it creates a level of fear among the community, among the society, which would otherwise not have had we had a more sociable situation. If when you look at the question of gun violence, how safe do we feel when we go out and recreate and to be entertained therefore? So it really does put us in a very unfortunate situation. In fact, if you want to consider it further, it would mean, therefore, that Dominica will be perceived as a haven for crime by the international community and it has the potential of affecting our tourism product. Because in Dominica, we boast ourselves as being a peaceful and loving nation. When word of that on the internet, you get anything on the internet. It's widely accessible. When people begin to hear of these incidences of increasing drug violence, in increase of gang violence, and deaths resulting of that, it will affect our image and it will affect our tourism product. So if the officials are not serious about addressing that, I think that time is now, because you know the good Lord always positions his people to come to a point where which they need to understand what needs to be done. And right now we have to address our situation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Paul, and thank you, Culture. Yes, so guys, before, I want to make sure we also touch on the strategic location of the Caribbean, especially Dominica being that middle island chain, in just how that is contributing to illegal activities in the region itself. Because, for example, how does that contribute to human trafficking? Right? We see now where, and I looked this up actually, so let me take a look here. The number of small fishing vessels smuggling illegal drugs has tripled in the Caribbean region. So the strategic location of the islands connecting North and South America and being a conduit to the rest of the world. Let's have a conversation about how that contributes to human trafficking. And then I also want us to spend some time talking about money laundering and everything else that needs to be brought to light as we continue talking about the illegal economies of the Caribbean. So Zidane, what are your thoughts on the strategic location of the islands and how they contribute to human trafficking?
Yes, well, like you rightly said, the Caribbean is very strategically placed to facilitate not only illegal activities but legal activities as well. Um, and Paul also touched on the increase in criminal activities and gun violence within Dominica, and you in regards to human trafficking. Before we spend so much time on the increase in gun related incidents happening in the island, we must ask ourselves, where are these guns coming from? And where are these vessels that facilitate human trafficking coming from? They are coming from outside. We do not make guns in Dominica. We don't have factories that employ people. We do not export guns out or sell guns within Dominica. So the problem must be our ports. We need to control our ports before we try to condemn the people, and the people are wrong. And I must say that the increase in gun violence in Dominica is really saddening. But we must look at the problem on a whole, and the problem starts within our ports, because majority of these guns are being imported. When it comes to facilitation of human trafficking, that it must be outside first, then it comes in. A boat cannot sink by the water around it, but it sinks by the water that it lets in. So we just really need to control our ports and know what we are letting in. And
Yeah, very good point. Lennon, let me come to you. What is going on in our oceans? Human trafficking, and here's what I found. Human trafficking and sex tourism are other concerns. The demand for cheap labor, sexual services, and certain criminal activities are among the root causes of trafficking, while a lack of opportunity, resources, and social standing are other contributing factors. So I think, we may spend a lot of time talking about drugs and talking about gun violence, but we don't talk as much. The only time we really hear about human trafficking is when, unfortunately, we heard recently 17 people lost their lives somewhere in the Caribbean waters. Recently, 17 Haitian nationals. It seems that is the only time we have that conversation, is when there's a tragic loss of life. But let us kind of explore that particular topic.
So Simone, I like to have a historical context also,
Yes.
because I think anytime you're looking at circumstances I am a strong believer in our history, a connection to where we are, and understanding the past will give us a better idea of where we're going. And here's why I'm bringing that up again. The same characteristics of the Caribbean that made piracy and buccaneering profitable back in the days still exist. The small island coves. As a matter of fact, Port Royal in Jamaica was considered so bad that when they had the earthquake that sank part of Port Royal, they thought it was because the place was too evil. There were brothels, there were pirates hanging out doing basically what they're doing today, drinking booze and all that good stuff. So we see that connection from even back then. The pirates and the buccaneers realized that the Caribbean was a good place to smuggle humans, smuggle stuff. It's never stopped. As time passes by and economies change, some of the same characters that I talked earlier on, the illegal trade continues. I remember when I was teaching in the Portsmouth Secondary School back in the days, there was an influx of Haitians and Dominican Republic folks coming to Dominica and using Dominica as a launching pad into the French islands linked to the bigger economies of France, and heading to St. Martin. Over a period of time, the population of these foreign nationals had increased, because my suspicion is if I move from Haiti to Dominica and I get a pass and I get to St. Martin, I am going to call my friends in Haiti and tell them, if you want to get to St. Martin, the best place to pass is through Dominica, because the customs doing nothing, the police is doing nothing. And there are people with boats in Portsmouth and elsewhere who are smuggling. So for years, there had been human smuggling going out in Portsmouth, and the authorities turned a blind eye. So we go back to our system of governance again. And what has happened in the past? So in geography, we talk about migration and pressures to migration, pulls and push factors. The Haitians and Dominican Republic population did not come to Dominica because there was a wealth of work. Typically, when Dominicans go to another country, they go there because we go to St. Martin and Guadeloupe for seeking greener pastures to the US because we want to work. We're looking for better economic opportunities. The fact is, these people were coming there because Dominica was serving as a launching pad to get into the other countries that we ourselves wanted to go. And there was a vibrant human smuggling chain in the north of Dominica. It's a known fact. We have news of boats capsizing with people losing their lives. We have news of Haitians coming to Dominica paying a fee at the airport. The authorities said nothing, and these people left on a boat. And guess what happened to that money? It stays. We've heard these stories. Whether it's true or not, nobody's investigated. But we've heard these stories. And as Paul said, Dominica is a small country. We know what's happening. But people turn a blind eye. And I have a note here that says, it is difficult to keep a continuing criminal enterprise profitable and survive over the long term unless there are means to protect it from law enforcement. And how they get protection: customs, police being paid off, illicit funds delivered and deposited, court cases fixed, stolen property bought and sold, politicians persuaded to not interfere, and so on. We also heard in the labor division where individuals were charging these migrants money for passports. This is also illegal economic activity. So what we have had happening is, when the structure of our governance, the structure that we have agreed upon to live under, is breaking down, then things like that happen. So we have human smuggling. It's people turning a blind eye. There's prostitution, people turning a blind eye. There's drugs, people turning a blind eye because our system is broken. And it's up to us as the people of Dominica to say enough is enough. And instead of being passive, stand up, speak out, and act responsibly, either to vote out these people who are not doing a good job or demand resignation of certain people who are not doing a good job. For example, we've seen situations where the guy who's second in command in the police force has questionable decisions based on his dealings with an individual who got shot. We've seen We've seen the police commissioner, the highest rank in the police of office in the police service, involved in kidnapping and having an individual deported without due process is a violation of his rights and his laws. So these are some of the factors that cause things like the racketeering, the human smuggling, to go unpunished for a long time. And eventually, like I said, it gets out of control. And when it gets out of control, it doesn't just affect the individuals involved. It affects the entire society. It affects you whether directly or indirectly. And that is when it needs to be dealt with. And that's the issue we're dealing with.
Yeah, yeah, and Lennon and everyone, it seems so overwhelming, but where do we go from there, from here? Because I think what we're going to start seeing is that all these illegal activities are now going to impact, and some of the Caribbean islands are already seeing this, that some of the illegal activities are impacting the legal activities. So what are going to be the impacts on tourism? What is going to be the impact on some of those legal ventures that many of us in Dominican and the rest of the Caribbean region rely on? But before we do, Jared Williams on Facebook is making an excellent point. He says we had politicians openly admitting that backdoor activities are a tradition in Dominica. They
Exactly.
also employed people to use the same means to get home to participate in our election. So when politicians can make illegal entry, quote unquote, a thing, what do you expect of those wanting to bring in illegal guns and drugs? And Simeon Joseph, let me say good evening to you. Thank you for being here. He says a powerful program. At least now I think the future of Dominicans is not all that lost. So I think Jared makes a fantastic point. And guys, I will come back and take some more of your comments. I'm not ignoring you. So yes, so thoughts, Paul, did you hear what I just read, Paul? You're muted.
You're mute.
I've been listening. I've been carefully listening to some of the comments, and I believe Lennon did an excellent job in identifying some of the key areas that are of concern with respect to the Dominican society, especially on the basis that those crimes are being condoned by officials, and it seems to be the modus operandi. I will always maintain that we have to stamp out crime within the Commonwealth of Dominica because the repercussions is too big for us to accommodate in our society. I started by alluding to the fact that it would tarnish our image, and our tourism product, of course, would be at risk. It also means that for investors wanting to come to Dominica, it may not seem as attractive as we want them to, because in most cases we want to ensure that our livelihoods are protected and people's economic interests can be sustained over time. Um, I'd like to think that the law enforcement organization, both the police force and also the court systems, will want to move in a very proactive manner in addressing these situations. But what we'll find is that no one is being really held accountable on the basis that even if those crimes are seen as crimes and are tried thereof, the penalties are so minimal. They don't serve as a deterrent factor, and they don't serve to shine as an example and to discourage somebody who would otherwise willingly want to participate in the underground economy. We have to understand that those crimes are largely premeditated. They're properly thought of, they're strategized, and then executed. uh Lennon mentioned the whole question of Dominica serving as a transshipment point, and you linked it to history. And while you were saying that, I was just smiling, not in any form of acknowledging, but just sort of a bright, like a light bulb in my head to understand that these crimes have existed. These traditions in terms of criminal activities have existed for a very, very long time. They've only sort of evolved and become more sophisticated. Uh, but we are aware, and not just we, the relevant authorities are aware. Culture likes to participate.
Yes, she
She
should.
only she only does that when I'm speaking. The relevant authorities are in fact aware of those criminal activities and the extent of those activities. What has to happen, and I'll make that point here, and it's not a nice one, and I'm not being careful to say. What might very well happen, Len and Dr. Mathieu, is that only after we have a serious period and increase in crimes and onto an intolerable and unbearable level will we really come to understand that it has to be addressed. I read a book a very long time ago. It says there can only be peace after war. And what that means, therefore, is that it's not hurting enough. It is not hurting the economy. It is not hurting our image, and that might very well be what is going to transpire for us to really get up on our loins and understand that we are not in a very good position in Dominica as it relates to criminal activities. And
Yes.
I really want to underscore that. And that is why we see all these rising incidences of gun violence. Because only now you have public officials taking this stand and making statements in relation to addressing it. And I've been paying very good attention to some of what is said, most of which I pass off as being flattery, to be very honest with you. But let us see what will happen. And these serve as very good examples for us. And that is the reason why I'm sure you have well thought of this program, Simone.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Culture. Lennon, let me come over to you. So where do we go from here, Lennon? The impact on, our legal economies from these illegal activities. And just one thing before you get started. Q95 at the studio, if DJ Sean or Lambi, if you see Zidane, he might be trying to come back into the program. He got disconnected. So just take a look out for him on the StreamYard to see if you can let him back in, please. Lennon, over to you.
So my good friend Alvin sent me something earlier this week. Alvin Thomas. Good night, Alvin. You know I have to call you.
Good night, Alvin. He always listens.
But it was very powerful, and I shared it to a couple of my friends. It says, when good men do nothing, and I'm going to read it. Often injustice lies in what you aren't doing, not only in what you are doing. Aren't doing, not only in what you are doing. It says, history abounds with evidence that humanity is capable of doing evil, not only actively, but passively. In some of our most shameful moments, from slavery to the Holocaust, to segregation, to the murder of Kitty Genovese, guilt wasn't limited to perpetrators, but to ordinary citizens who, for a multitude of reasons, declined to get involved. It is that old line, all evil needs to prevail is for good men to do nothing. It is not enough to just not do evil. You must also be a force for good in the world as best as you can. That says it all. We are in a society, in a jurisdiction where gun violence, human trafficking, drug abuse, sexual harassment of our minors, of our young ladies, corruption in the political elite, racketeering, money laundering, and frankly, the manipulation of our society that has added to the increase in criminal activity and the underground activity. And what is really painful, and that's why I speak, and I keep saying I don't have to. I love my country. I think Dominica is a beautiful place. As a matter of fact, I was out with my coworkers today. One of the guys does scuba diving, and he said Dominica is beautiful. And he said the reason is because people don't know where it is. So why are we going to spoil such a society before people even knowing the beauty that lies in that country? But when good people, the priests, the pastors, the people in the cabinet who knows what's happening, the permanent secretaries, the police officers, the lawyers, the amount of lawyers we have per capita in Dominica is ridiculous. Do you hear them? They're all silent because why? The same economic pressures. There are no private sector. There's no industry. There is nothing where they can go make a reasonable living. Their livelihood depends on a job from the government. So as a result, they sit silent. So when good men sit silent, the society deteriorates, and it doesn't only affect the ones who are perpetrating the crimes, but everyone in society. And if you think you are innocent because you are quiet, you are just as guilty. And I think where we start is we have to self-examine. I'm going to draw a reference to driving a car. An engineer goes and he builds a vehicle, but he knows that vehicle is going to run and it's going to overheat. And if it overheat, that engine is going to seize and it's going to destroy not just the engine, but the entire car. Think of it as a society. What does he do? He puts sensors and measurements in there. So when it reaches to that point, there is some form of regulation to prevent your car from being from destroyed. Our society is no different. If we don't have this checks and balance, if we don't have this self-reflection, this self-control, realizing that, hey, you know what, things are going wrong, we need to make a difference. It starts with every single one of us Dominicans realizing we on the wrong trajectory. And I don't care if you're my friend, I don't care if you're my brother, I don't care if you're my sister. Wrong is wrong no matter who's doing it. And I'm not going down the drain with you because we are related or we're friends. This is the kind of ethics we have to take. And unless the society stands up and demands and asks for more, it's just going to spin out of control. And it's only when those who are at the top begin to physically feel the pain, that is when it will be too late. I'm not even going to say that's when they're going to make the changes. It will be too late. So I think it's upon every single one of us, look ourselves in the mirror and examine and say, what can I do to help my country move forward? After 20 years of having, frankly, a non-productive government, people think that, oh, it's not the prime minister, it's not the... Let me tell you something, leadership matters. They say that themselves. And if you have bad example, then your flock is going to follow. If leadership doesn't matter, then I don't need to go to church. I don't need to listen to the priest and bishop and the pastors because I can do stuff on my own. But it matters. And when we have a society that is broken and corrupt from the core, then what you have happening is the illegal activity, the folks who are rebellious of a structured system, a stable system. By the way, society wants, the natural law is to be stable. The government needs to be stable, the country needs to be stable, and the criminal influence, what we've seen in Dominica, is a destabilizing force created by the innate corruption we have in our system and our government right now.
Yeah, and Lennon, you're absolutely correct. Let me go quickly to Paul while Culture is giving him a little break.
You know, it's interesting that you would say that, Lennon. And you see what we're doing there? We're actively participating in a check and balance. In most cases, we represent what would consider civil movement or civil rights movement.
Yes.
Interesting enough, you'd mention that because I've always made reference to the Anti-Terrorism Act, which was passed in Parliament. And it was only done to quench the fire of the opposition or anyone who speaks against the government. I take very good time. I looked over the law and understood exactly what it meant. It means that as we are civil individuals operating within our country, we want now to sort of speak up and make known to the administration that those activities need to be addressed. But even when doing that, you run the risk of yourself being persecuted. In fact, the legal system would work very efficiently to put either one of us behind bars rather than putting a criminal behind bar. And I remember a few years ago, the Coalition for NGOs, which was spearheaded by Mrs. Alexander, it was an attempt to bring together the civil society movement to address some issues in relation to child sexual abuse. And when we saw the incidences with Kanisha and her abduction, and we also saw the rise in crime with crime related to sexual abuse. You know, I wondered to myself, where was that? Where is that organization, and why not it? Why isn't it now taking up the mantle and run with it? And I can tell you why. The fact is, these people have become so demotivated. They have become persecuted for even standing up for that which is right, which is justice. So we find ourselves in a situation in Dominica whereby there's no civil society movement. There's no NGO community. There's no one who stands in defense of what is right and what is just in our communities. And because of that, crime goes unabated. It's free. And because of that, because of that, who is if the public officials, the people who are supposed to be addressed in those situations, uh, if they go, how you say, if they're given a hall pass, if you're to look at a high school example, if they're given a hall pass to condone and to create environments, conducive environments for crime to thrive, who is going to stop it? So you see how bad it is for us as a country?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to go back to a point that, thank you, Paul. I want to go back to a point that I made earlier, because I think in Dominica, we are under the illusion that, oh, this is not a problem. Look at the other islands. But again, we have to remember that many of these other islands were sitting in the same position that we're sitting now. That this is not as serious, but look at the number of murders. Look at the increase, already 13, and we're only in July. So it is a wake-up call that it is time to look at what are the contributing factors to this violence. And a lot of it is illegal activities. And I just want to make sure that we also make a note here, because this is research, this is information from UE. And it says, not only does crime cause human suffering, but as the reports demonstrate, it can cause capital flight, the loss of those with skills or education who prefer to work in a more certain environment, and changes for the worse in the perception of the nation's investment climate. Moreover, studies by the Inter-America International Bank, the University of the West Indies, and others show that crime is also having a negative effect on social development by diverting limited resources away from health and education to security, the control of crime, and the provision of facilities necessary for the administration of justice. I mean, do we even see the diversion of the resources away from education? Do we have enough resources allocated to fighting crime in Dominica, Lennon?
But if you look at the recent budget, I can't remember the exact figures. Just go ahead and look at the recent budget allocations, and you will see how much had been placed for national security and police. And if you are putting more money for national security and police, that means one of two things: you have serious criminal problems in your country, and it needs to be addressed. So you need to pump resources in there. So it's exactly right. But let me add a couple of statistics. Mexico, because of the corruption and the underground economy, between 2006 and 2021, there were a total of 350,000 to 400,000 deaths, murders as a result of the drugs. That's a lot of people. And one of the things I think, a couple of things we should consider. I frankly believe there are some things that we can do as a region instead of an individual country, and which is one of them is patrolling our seas.
Yep.
Because often we have to rely on the U.S. Navy or the U.S. Coast Guard, for resources in combating the drug shipment from South America to North America, where the market is. So I think there are certain things like the fishing industry, the boating industry that has to be handled on a regional level. And if you're talking about economies of scale, the Caribbean region has over 44 million people, and I think too long in the thrust for economic development, the population and the people are not factored into that context. And if you take, for example, Dominica, we have a government control, or say, and government encourage brain drain in Dominica when they pay for thousands of students to go study overseas, with no way of trying to get them back to use that education and knowledge to develop the country. And think of what is happening recent. We have billions of dollars generated from passport sales, and we are using a foreign company to build it when there are hundreds of educated, bright Dominicans and engineers, not just Dominicans, in the Caribbean. 44 million people in the Caribbean region. That's enough people for industry, for market, for travel. Can you imagine if just 4% of that population had inter-island travel, inter-island tourism, the amount of economic activity we could generate? But I think what happens is in the pursuit of self-serving policies, self-aggrandizement, how long I can stay in office, we fail to look at the bigger picture in regional development. So the people of the Caribbean have been shortchanged. Criminal activity increased in Jamaica and Trinidad after politicians interfered with drug dealers and criminals. It's in the records. And then they move to the dons and the guys who run the poor and areas in Jamaica with drug dealers because the government frankly couldn't provide for them. So what we have seen is policies that are bent on how I can get reelected every year, manipulating the people, using legitimate explanations to manipulate the people every election, and not realizing in a region with 44 million people where you get engineers, scientists, doctors, marine biologists, chemists, all these folks, we have people, for God's sake, working with the CDC to develop vaccines and stuff, not in the Caribbean. We have a University of the West Indies, and what we have done, we've trained mostly lawyers and doctors, and we don't think of the innovation using the sea. Here's the irony of the situation. We're surrounded by ocean and water. We have the largest market for fishing next to us in North America, and we're not dominating that industry because we are doing it as a little country as Dominica. So everybody is trying to get a piece of the pie. So there are some things that we have to work as a region to help develop that place. We're talking about inter-island travel. And the reason why I'm mentioning all that is because these are some of the ways that can generate economic activity in the islands, so they can move people away from the illegal economic activities to the legal. So we have look at the current situation we have. For 40 years, we've been talking about an international airport, $250 million wasted by the previous government, right? And today, 44 years later, after our independence, we're still on the same conversation where we could have 4% of the 44 million people in the Caribbean traveling within the region, generating that economic activity, investing in the hotels, investing in the Caribbean entrepreneurship. We don't have that opportunity. We've seen our own resources being sold by foreigners. They get money, and we have no stake in the hotel in our country from our resources.
Absolutely.
That is why I said, at this point, Dominicans should be so pissed that, frankly, I wouldn't go to work. But you see, we are afraid of the intimidation, and we are afraid of losing what we have already lost. And we don't realize we have already lost our dignity when you've been working for 20 years and you can't even build a house for yourself. We have lost our dignity when you have to walk up to the financial center every Wednesday to beg for socks and shoes and money for your scholarship. We have lost our pride and self-worth when we put people above us. We put people to serve, to equitably distribute the resources of the country, and they manipulate us. We have lost our dignity when we go begging for scholarships because we are afraid of our children not benefiting. And that is the kind of situation we have ourselves in. And I will say again, unless good men stand up and say enough is enough, we will get absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, thank you, Lennon. Paul, let me come over to you for your final thoughts as we wind down for this evening.
Yeah, thank you, Simone. And I really thank you for understanding the interruptions. In most cases, you would know that I would be always very willing to share a lot more
and let me just commend you greatly. And I want everyone on the Facebook Live to give a round of applause, a young man who is doing an excellent job taking care of his daughter and facilitating this conversation. I know he had incredible things to add to the conversation. So this is what it is about. This is about working together as a community
Precisely.
to ensure we can take care of our children, but we can also participate in community building. So thank you,
That
Paul.
is true, man. My life work is devoted to my children, so I suppose they're
Absolutely.
closely knitted to it. I
Right.
just wanted to chime in on what Lennon had to say, and so when I look at from a developer's perspective, when I look at the richness that we have as a country, and not being able to leverage our resources to a greater advantage, it really pains me. In most cases, I sometimes wonder whether I should quench my thoughts as it regards the political landscape. But I'm not allowed to do that. The Holy Spirit does not allow me to go to rest while Dominica is really just taken for a ride. Uh, it would make good sense if we focus on developing our country to the extent that it can sustain livelihoods. I've always mentioned that we have 72,000 people, and that is really not a lot of people to take care of. You both are in the US, and you know that is a fraction of some communities. What we should seek to do, however, is to utilize the resources and the abundances of the resources we have, develop industries that surround these natural resources in order to sustain life, create employment. Earlier, the young man mentioned, or I'm not sure if it's you, Lennon, who said that 400 persons have graduated from the Dominican State College. Where are they going to be employed? That should be the next best question on any politicians or any business on any political leader's mind. Unless we begin to develop the country to accommodate or to provide jobs that are concurrent to the skills that these young individuals have, we're doing them a great disjustice. I remember when I left college, I was on a fire, I was burning and passionate about entering the world of work. And fortunately, through my creativity, I was able to join an industry which continues to have relevance, which is insurance and real estate. But not every young person has that skill set. We also have to consider: are we essentially preparing young persons for the future, or are we skillfully retarding their development by training them in areas that are no longer consistent, or giving equipping them with skills that are no longer job relevant? So there's a lot of questions that we have to answer going forward. You and I, Lennon, and Dr. Mathieu, we're not the only ones that is charged with that responsibility. I think every Dominican has a moral and social responsibility thereof to ensure that the country progress in a manner which is beneficial to everyone and the larger community. Uh, I know very well the modus operandi of the Dominican Labour Party. I spent 20 years with them in the inner halls and the factory of the Dominican Labour Party. And when as a young man, I realized that the Labour Party's development agenda was not to liberate Dominicans in any significant manner. That is where it struck the note for me. And I said, my values are no longer consistent with that of yours, because the founding fathers, when they developed Dominica and what they envisioned for Dominica, was that everybody would be economically viable and everybody would be able to participate in the country in a manner which offers them affluence, and affluence is not limited to one single class. And this whole brick and mortar development agenda by the Dominican Labour Party, as you would see, the housing revolution, these mass infrastructures, is at the expense of the social fabric of the country. You cannot put the cart before the horse. And there are things that necessitated our development that has not happened. In fact, I hear now this new song being sung for the Labour Party. It is as if suddenly they have listened to all the gripes and the grinds and the talks of the opposition and everybody who stood in oppose of it. All of a sudden, you find these bright ideas popping up when they should have been implemented 20 years ago. And it really is too late for the Dominican Labour Party, however long they feel that they can hold on to this reign of power at the expense of people's lives. And we have to understand that politics involves people's lives. It's a granny, a uncle, a auntie, a niece, a baby, and we cannot be playing games with these people's lives. So I want to thank you, Simone, always, Dr. Mathieu, for bringing me on your program and offering me a voice by which I can help educate and inform the majority of Dominicans listening to your various platforms. Thank you tremendously. And Nenan, it was an excellent opportunity to meet you. You're very well learned man, I must say. I'm impressed.
Yes, yes, and that is why we continue to tap into the experts, our experts at home and abroad on topics of national interest. And I want to thank you guys for your contribution. Zidane was unable to join us. His Wi-Fi gave off, but we want to thank him as well for his contribution. And we just want to take some comments from the Facebook folks that we haven't heard from as we wind down in the next 2 minutes or so. So we have Thai Francis, and she's asking if there is sex tourism in Dominica. I would encourage you to look that up a little bit further, Thai. Maybe you can speak to some folks on the ground, and they will be more than happy to help you with that. As a matter of fact, Pyro Davidson is here, and I'm sure that is probably something he can speak on. He says, historically, Dominica has been a haven of escaped slaves who have lived free and allow each his own. This is a culture which has worked against us as an independent nation. So let's take some comments from some folks we haven't heard. Auntie Hammy, Hermelina Watson Duvany out there in Florida. Always great to have you on board. Let's see who else we have. Flacco, great to see you. I don't say this lightly, but I feel that soon those in authority will be soliciting people to commit murder. If they aren't already, it is dark in Dominica. And of course, these are not the views of Q95 or Simone Mathieu. These are the views of Flacco. So let's make sure we ascribe that to him. Marshall, great to have you on board. Sometimes an administration will want to do a little of everything. However, there are going to be some priorities that will top the list. The security and safety concern of citizens, as mentioned earlier, should come first. So take some comments from folks we haven't heard from. And again, guys, thank you for being here and always being so active on the Facebook Live platform. Aaron Pierre, great program. Thank you, Aaron. Let's see, we have Desmond Green. Tell them, thank you, Desmond. Jared, Paul, you are a great inspiration. So thank you for that. Thank you, everyone who joined us. Paco says Dominica is a prison of ignorance, and God help those who know better. And I just want to leave us with this thought, because I think too many times when we start talking about the lack of opportunities in Dominica, the first thing some of the acolytes of the ruling party will say is that Dominicans are lazy. They need
that's
to
unfortunate.
Opportunities. No, the prime minister and the government should not have to create factories and job opportunities for Dominicans. How many entrepreneurs can we accommodate in Dominica? Let's be realistic and think of it this way. When Dominicans like Lennon, you and I, we leave Dominica where we had zero opportunities, what do we do when we come to America? We get 2 or 3 jobs and we start supporting our families back home. So I want to debunk that notion that I hear far too often when I was in Dominican, and I would speak to those who are clearly supporters of the current administration. And they would kind of allude to the fact that, it is people's fault that they have to look into illegal opportunities because they are lazy. And I know, Lennon, you're boiling over to say something. I am giving you 1 minute. Lambi has to go home.
I know. Hey, Simone, Paul Baron, I am pretty impressed with you, man. You are an intelligent guy.
That's why I bring him back all the time.
And I'm telling you, man, it's sad when people like you don't flourish to your full potential. I think the greatest human tragedy, life is so short for us to be on this earth, have one chance at life and not realize our full potential. But Simone, I'll tell you something. I grew up with a dad who was a school principal. He taught me values, principles, and how to work hard. And for my entire young days, you know what I did during the summer holidays? I raised pigs every day in the summer. That's what I did. Morning, noon, and night, I raised pigs and know how to work hard. And I got to the US, and I would be at work at 4 o'clock in the morning and 9 o'clock in the night that I leave and wake up the next day and do it every day. So we're not beggars. We are hardworking people. Given the opportunity,
that's very true.
We will flourish. And that is why you see people come up to the US and other areas where they have the environment to flourish.
Enabling environment.
Enabling environment. And I thank God I made that decision and got that opportunity. But it pains me to see people like Flacco, to see people like Paul Barron, to see the amount of young guys, some of them who are in illegal trade, who are talented, and will not realize their full potential because our country doesn't give them that opportunity.
Yeah, so I gave you a minute, Paul. I'll give you a minute as well.
I just want to say that was very well put together, Len, and honestly, and that is what pains me mostly. Yeah? I've taken the journey to be an entrepreneur on the basis that I saw no other avenue that was created by the public sector to accommodate me as an individual. And I just felt that the richness and the level of intelligence I have to be leveraged against the better interests of myself and my family. But because I have such a passion for community, I can't walk away from my story. And because of that, I continue to engage myself in community and leadership. And I've really set a goal to become the Prime Minister of Dominica.
Absolutely. I'd like the first interview, please.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you, Paul Barron, Lennon Matthew,
you.
Zidane, John Vale, who had to leave us early. Lammy, thank you for holding down the console for us. Showing
Thank you,
Norris,
Lammy.
Mr. G, and the Q95. Of course, our listeners to the big station Q95 FM, those who watched and followed us on Facebook and on YouTube Live at Q95 FM Radio and Push Past 10. So this is the place we come. We will continue to tap into our experts at home and abroad as we continue to look at economic opportunities for Dominica, and we'll continue to look at how the world around us is changing for the good and the bad. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Don't forget to keep it locked to Q95 FM Radio for all the best in programming. You can jump on Q95DA.com. And if you miss any portion of this program, remember that you can always find it on Q95 FM Radio on Facebook and YouTube, as well as Push Past 10. And for all the ways that we continue to grow our international community, our global village, especially as it relates to the new Dominica Child Protection Society that we are creating for this important mission, you can always follow me on pushpast10.com. So pushpast10.com. And that is also my handle on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, wherever we have social media. So again, I want to thank you for being here. I am Simone Mathieu. You've been listening to Roots Connections on Q. And our topic was the illegal economies, or as Paul likes to call it, the underground economies in Dominica and the Caribbean. And with that, I wish you a pleasant good evening, good night. Have a restful evening and the productive rest of your week. So thank you, guys. You can unmute and say bye to the audience. Thank you so much for your contributions. Thank you, Lammy. All right. Have a good evening.
See you guys.
Joe Rastafari. Oh, oh, children, home. Wanna go home. Oh, yes, children, home. Got to go. Yeah, we've been trodden from Genesis right on through Revelation. We've been a subject to master's feet. So bliss, so we wanna go. Yeah, we are a people enslaved and sold, scattered through the earth. Jacob is calling his children 12 tribes, so we want go. Oh, children, home. Oh, to Zion, home. Wanna go, take me there, home. Oh, to Zion, home. Wanna go, yeah. We've been trodden from Genesis right on through Revelation. We've been a subject to master's feet. So blick, so we wanna go. Oh, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, and Zebulun, Isaac, Gad, and Asher, Naphtali, Joseph, and Benjamin. 12 tribes, so we want go home. Oh, children, home. Oh, to Zion, oh, I wanna go. Oh, children, home. Oh, take me home. Oh, I wanna go. Yeah. Oh, children, home. Oh, oh, children, home. Wanna go? Said I'm longing to. Oh, to Zion. Oh, wanna go? So here I say, yeah. Africa for Africans, a home and abroad, so I'm almost go home. Yeah. What that lay, what that lay, what that lay, what that lay. Tell me how you feeling, what that lay. Tell me how you feeling, what that. Are you feeling irie, what that lay? Are you feeling hopeful, what that lay? Are you feeling irie, what? Are you feeling what that lay?
Around you, rub shoulders, man. I'm gonna go outside and see.
Here is Elton.
The world is not finished.
And they weren't in Vision Borough all that time.
Exactly. So it's just here I am.
As well as being into music, you were also a poet.
I just started from the high school. From 93. It's incredible how it has the time, the year,